This is as close as I could get to that boat right there. That's a Coast Guard station, by the way. That's the boat Soulmate. That is Brian Hooker's sailboat.
The Soulmate casts the disappearance of Lynette Hooker Hoke. There is a moment in every investigation when the language changes. Not missing person, not boating accident, not tragic incident at sea. The language that matters now is this: crime scene tape, evidence bags, a processing table on a federal dock in Fort Pierce, Florida. That is not caution, that is a legal declaration. It means what happened on or around that boat is now being treated as a criminal matter by the federal government of the United States. Lynette Hooker has been missing since April 4th, 2026. She has not been found. No charges have been filed. Brian Hooker denies any wrongdoing and is presumed innocent. That standard will be held throughout this documentary. But federal agents are inside that boat right now, going through every system, every surface, every piece of data it holds. And some of what they are looking at cannot be wiped, cannot be cleaned, and cannot be explained away. This is the full picture of the Lynette Hooker case. Subscribe now and turn on notifications so you are here when this breaks. Drop a comment and tell us where in the world you are watching from. Now, let us get into it. Lynette Hooker was 55 years old, from Onstead, Michigan, a small lakefront town in Lenawee County, in the part of the state known as the Irish Hills. She was not someone who sat still. Her daughter Carly Aylesworth described her as a woman who worked out consistently, was creative, and documented everything around her with a 360-degree camera she carried on the water. Her mother Darlene Hamlet told the Associated Press simply, "Our family grew up on water." Lynette her whole life has been near lakes, on boats, sailing and swimming. Lynette and Brian had been married for approximately 25 years. Their sailing life built over more than a decade, starting on a small two-person boat on Lake Michigan, and eventually moving up to a 46-foot Morgan sailboat they named Soulmate. They documented the whole thing on YouTube under the channel called The Sailing's Hookers. On Instagram, Lynette's own profile described her in 4 words she wrote herself: photographer, sailor, living my best life. She had traded a long-term career at AT&T, sold her home, and used her retirement savings to fund this life. In a private message to a friend she wrote, "I quit my awesome career, sold my house, and gave away everything I own." The Soulmate casts the disappearance of Lynette Hooker Hoke. There is a moment in every investigation when the language changes. Not missing person, not boating accident, not tragic incident at sea. The language that matters now is this: crime scene tape, evidence bags, a processing table on a federal dock in Fort Pierce, Florida. That is not caution, that is a legal declaration. It means what happened on or around that boat is now being treated as a criminal matter by the federal government of the United States. Lynette Hooker has been missing since April 4th, 2026. She has not been found. No charges have been filed. Brian Hooker denies any wrongdoing and is presumed innocent. That standard will be held throughout this documentary. But federal agents are inside that boat right now, going through every system, every surface, every piece of data it holds. And some of what they are looking at cannot be wiped, cannot be cleaned, and cannot be explained away. This is the full picture of the Lynette Hooker case. Subscribe now and turn on notifications so you are here when this breaks. Drop a comment and tell us where in the world you are watching from. Now, let us get into it. Lynette Hooker was 55 years old, from Onstead, Michigan, a small lakefront town in Lenawee County, in the part of the state known as the Irish Hills. She was not someone who sat still. Her daughter Carly Aylesworth described her as a woman who worked out consistently, was creative, and documented everything around her with a 360-degree camera she carried on the water. Her mother Darlene Hamlet told the Associated Press simply, "Our family grew up on water." Lynette her whole life has been near lakes, on boats, sailing and swimming. Lynette and Brian had been married for approximately 25 years. Their sailing life built over more than a decade, starting on a small two-person boat on Lake Michigan, and eventually moving up to a 46-foot Morgan sailboat they named Soulmate. They documented the whole thing on YouTube under the channel called The Sailing's Hookers. On Instagram, Lynette's own profile described her in 4 words she wrote herself: photographer, sailor, living my best life. She had traded a long-term career at AT&T, sold her home, and used her retirement savings to fund this life. In a private message to a friend, she wrote, "I quit my awesome career, sold my house, and gave away everything I own. That was not a complaint. That was a deliberate choice." Their last YouTube video went up on March 9th, 2026, less than 4 weeks before Lynette disappeared. The last clip she posted to Instagram showed her and Brian dancing on the deck of the Soulmate. Her caption, "Me and my husband." That is who Lynette Hooker was before this became a federal investigation. Brian Hooker was 58 years old at the time of Lynette's disappearance. He is a former United States Marine. That detail has come up repeatedly in this case, not as background, but as a direct challenge to his account of what happened the night Lynette went missing. The documented history between Brian and Lynette goes back years. Police records from their former home in Kentwood, Michigan show that law enforcement was called to the household at least twice over the course of a decade. In 2006, Brian was acquitted of a child conduct charge in Michigan court. In 2015, a confrontation occurred that both described differently. Brian told police Lynette had struck him in the face multiple times. He was found with a swollen, bloody nose. Lynette told responding officers that Brian had hit her in the forehead, and that while she was trying to reach her children who had locked themselves upstairs, Brian choked her and punched her. Lynette was the one placed in custody that night. A prosecutor later found insufficient evidence to determine who started it. No charges were filed against either party. These are court records, not convictions. But Carly Aylesworth went further. Speaking to Fox News, she alleged her mother had confided that Brian choked her, and that as recently as January 2024, Brian had threatened to throw Lynette overboard during a fight. She told Fox News directly, "There is history of him choking her out and threatening to throw her overboard. So the fact that this is actually happening makes me believe there is more to the story." Brian's attorney denied those allegations categorically. Then came the messages. In January and February of 2024, Lynette was sending private messages to a friend named Marnie Stevenson, a fellow sailor the couple had met in Florida in 2023. CBS News obtained those messages. In them, Lynette wrote that their marriage had lasted 6 weeks of cruising. She wrote that she was not going back to the boat. She described conditions on board as real bad and said she could not stay out there with him. A month after writing those words, she was back on the boat. No public explanation exists for why she returned. By early 2026, their social media showed an ordinary continuation of the sailing life they had always presented to the world. Whatever the state of that marriage was in private, it was not visible to anyone outside the Soulmate. Saturday, April 4th, 2026. Brian and Lynette spent part of the evening at the Abaco Inn in Hopetown on Elbow Cay in the Abaco Islands. A regular Saturday night. Music, conversation, a waterfront bar. Lynette's family confirmed the two had been there for hours. At approximately 7:30 in the evening, they boarded their 8-foot hard-bottom dinghy to head back to the Soulmate. Moored in Aunt Pat's Bay, roughly 2.5 miles away, Brian told authorities the weather had turned. Winds around 20 miles per hour, water choppy. And then, he said, Lynette went overboard. He told authorities she had the boat's ignition key in her pocket when she went in. That key was attached to the engine's safety lanyard. When Lynette went over the side, the lanyard pulled free and the engine cut off automatically. Brian was now powerless in the dark on choppy water. Neither of them was wearing a life jacket. In a phone call Brian later made to Blaine Stevenson, a friend from the sailing community, a call he did not know was being recorded. Brian said he called out for Lynette for approximately an hour without hearing her respond. He said the current moved her further from him. He said the last time he saw her she was moving in the direction of shore. On that same call he described the moment she went over by saying she had basically just bounced off the dinghy in 20 miles per hour winds. He also told Stevenson that he threw a flotation device in her direction. Then he paddled the dinghy alone, away from Aunt Pat's Bay, toward Marsh Harbor. He arrived at the Marsh Harbor boat yard at approximately 4 in the morning on Sunday, April 5th. That is more than 8 hours after Lynette went into the water. At the boat yard, Brian told a worker what had happened. That worker called the authorities. Brian did not contact police himself. He formally reported Lynette missing later that morning. Search and rescue crews launched immediately by land, air, and sea, professional divers, drone technology, a helicopter. Hopetown Volunteer Fire and Rescue, the U.S. Coast Guard, all searching Aunt Pat's Bay and the surrounding water near Elbow Cay. By April 16th, the operation was reclassified from search and rescue to search and recovery. Lynette Hooker was not found. And since April 16th, Bahamian authorities have not issued a single public update on the search. Here is the question that has sat at the center of this investigation from day one. Brian left the Abaco Inn at around 7:30 in the evening. He arrived at the Marsh Harbor boatyard at around 4 in the morning. More than 8 hours. That distance does not take 8 hours to paddle. Not even in rough conditions. Maritime sources familiar with those waters confirm that clearly. The gap has never been publicly explained. And then there is the second question. Brian Hooker is a former United States Marine. He described conditions as rough with 20 miles per hour winds and choppy water. He said Lynette was last seen moving toward shore. He did not go in after her. He did not drop anchor near where she went in. He paddled in the opposite direction and arrived at a boatyard on a different part of the island more than 8 hours later. Carly Aylesworth said it plainly. Even if she did fall off, I don't understand why he didn't drop anchor and look for her or even swim to go get her, because he was a Marine. The story just doesn't add up. She also told CNN that Brian called her on Sunday evening, more than 24 hours after her mother went into the water. His tone, she said, was matter of fact. Hey, your mom is missing. We don't know where she is. She has been missing since last night. Then he kept talking. Then he suddenly ended the call. She later received a voicemail. Brian said, "Hello, honey. I just got a call from Hopetown Search and Rescue, and they found a flotation device that I threw to Mom when she fell overboard." He had a flotation device on the dinghy, close enough to throw, and he still paddled away. Blaine Stevenson, who had recorded the early phone call Brian made without knowing it, later sent Brian a private message. It read, "They trusted you with their loved one, and you didn't live up to it. Brian's position has been consistent throughout." He told NBC News, "I have never harmed Lynette, and I would never harm Lynette, and I want to find Lynette." His attorney stated he categorically and unequivocally denies any wrongdoing and has been cooperating with authorities. The 8-hour gap remains unexplained. And as of this recording, Brian Hooker remains a named suspect in this investigation. On April 8, 2026, 4 days after Lynette went missing, Brian Hooker was arrested in Marsh Harbor as a suspect. Bahamian Assistant Commissioner Eduardo Dames confirmed to Reuters the arrest was based on, in his words, "some probable cause we have." That same day, the United States Coast Guard opened its own separate criminal investigation. Brian was questioned intensively over several days, covering his relationship with Lynette, the events of April 4th, and the 8-hour gap. Authorities extended his detention under Bahamian law to hold him through the weekend without filing formal charges. On April 13th, he was released. His Bahamian attorney, Terrell Butler, said there was no evidence to justify continued detention. Commissioner Shanta Knowles was clear. Brian Hooker remained a named suspect. His release was not an exoneration. The following day, Brian gave on-camera interviews to U.S. networks. He told ABC News that finding Lynette was his sole focus, no matter how likely or unlikely. He said it would take a higher authority to make him leave the Bahamas. The next day, he boarded a flight home. His attorney said he left to be with his terminally ill mother. As of this recording, his whereabouts are not publicly known, and he has not been made available for further comment. After Brian returned to the United States, the Soulmate sat moored in Marsh Harbor for nearly a month. The same harbor, the same anchorage, untouched. Then on Friday, May 8, 2026, it moved. 2 men, a cargo captain and a first mate, were hired reportedly on behalf of the registered owner to bring the Soulmate north toward the United States. The central piece of physical evidence in an active criminal investigation was now crossing an international border. Carly Aylesworth noticed first. She posted a video on Mother's Day, Sunday, May 11th. She said she had seen the boat moving. She said neither man on board was Brian. She had never seen either of them before, and then she said they turned off their GPS, the Automatic Identification System, AIS, is how ships broadcast their position continuously while at sea. Every offshore vessel is expected to broadcast it. When the Soulmate left Marsh Harbor heading north, the AIS went silent. Not because of weather, not because of a documented failure, The signal simply stopped. A maritime tracking platform called No Foreign Land briefly picked up the signal during the crossing. Then that signal also disappeared. What most people did not know at the time was that the Coast Guard had already been watching. Federal patrol vessels were not escorting the Soulmate. They were tracking it, monitoring its movement north toward Florida, waiting. On Saturday, May 10, 2026, approximately 40 miles off the Florida coast, Coast Guard vessels intercepted the Soulmate in what News Nation contributor Ashley Banfield specifically described as an interdiction, a deliberate pre-planned federal law enforcement action. A crew boarded the vessel, a tow line was secured. The Soulmate was brought to the U.S. Coast Guard station at Fort Pierce, Florida. Drone images obtained by CBS News showed the boat moored at the federal facility, crime scene tape around the vessel, a processing table set up on the pier, agents removing items in sealed evidence bags. When federal agents set up a processing table on a dock and seal items with chain of custody documentation, that investigation is not building towards something. It has arrived at something. The sailboat named Soulmate, purchased with Lynette Hooker's retirement savings, was now a federally designated crime scene. On Mother's Day, while agents worked through the boat at Fort Pierce, Carly posted a video. She said, "It is pretty hard right now to know that she is not a text away anymore. The Coast Guard Investigative Service, CGS, are not general investigators. They are maritime specialists. They know how boats record data, where logs are stored, and how to read a vessel's digital history the way a detective reads a crime scene. They have the full resources of the federal government and can call on the FBI and the FBI laboratory at Quantico." Forensic scientist Joseph Scott Morgan, speaking to Fox News Digital, confirmed investigators are examining the vessel for any evidence that something occurred on board and for any indication that surfaces may have been cleaned after the fact. Tools like luminol can detect biological traces on fiberglass surfaces weeks after the fact, even after cleaning. Morgan was honest about one challenge. Taking possession of the boat more than a month after April 4th means some biological evidence may have degraded in the Florida heat. That is a legitimate concern, but the most important evidence on the Soulmate is not biological, it is electronic. And electronic evidence does not degrade. The Soulmate's onboard systems include GPS, radar, autopilot, and a battery management system that logged every electrical event on the vessel with precise timestamps, every light, every water pump, every charging port, all of it recorded with the exact time it occurred. Carly Aylesworth, who spent time aboard the vessel in February 2026, described Lynette's consistent habit of going below and showering off the salt water every single time she returned to the boat after being ashore. Every time. Without exception, if Lynette came back aboard the Soulmate on the night of April 4th, the boat's own logs should show it, lights on, water running, hot water system activated, devices charging, the electrical signature of two people coming home. If the Soulmate sat empty and dark from 7:30 in the evening until rescue crews brought Brian back the following morning, the logs should show nothing but automatic background systems. That log either supports Brian's account or it contradicts it. There is no middle ground. It recorded what drew power and when. CGS has that data and they are reading it now, beyond the battery logs. The Soulmate also appears to have a security camera system under the bimini, the cockpit canopy. A camera in that position would have a direct line of sight to anyone stepping aboard from the dinghy. Modern security cameras on live aboard vessels frequently upload to cloud storage automatically. That means even if the device was removed from the boat, a remote server may already hold a continuous record of whatever that camera captured on the night of April 4th. A server accessible to CGIS under federal subpoena, the Soulmate also carried a Starlink satellite terminal mounted on the mast. Every device that comes within range of a Starlink terminal connects automatically, and that connection is logged with a precise timestamp on SpaceX's servers. SpaceX is a United States company. So those server records are accessible to federal investigators under a Department of Justice subpoena regardless of what happened to any physical device. On the boat, if Brian and Lynette's phones connected to the Soulmate's Starlink network on the night of April 4th, that event is timestamped on a remote server. a server that does not know or care about the account that has been given publicly. According to maritime law professor Kenneth Angeron of the University of Houston Law Center, the Coast Guard has full legal jurisdiction to make an arrest if the evidence leads there, despite the incident occurring in Bahamian waters. Because the Soulmate carries an American flag registration, investigators have also documented personal belongings recovered inside the Soulmate: a navy blue headscarf, a turquoise jacket Lynette was believed to be wearing the evening of April 4th, her Apple Watch with a pink strap, Lynette's habit of removing her Apple Watch to charge it. The moment she returned to the boat was something people close to her knew without exception. Brian told authorities Lynette went overboard before they ever reached the Soulmate. If that is accurate, those items have no business being inside the cabin. Their location on the vessel directly conflicts with the timeline, Brian has stated to authorities and to the media. Investigators are documenting their exact location as part of the forensic record. It is also worth noting that Bahamian investigators confirmed electronic devices were seized from the vessel under a search warrant before it ever left Marsh Harbor. The digital examination of this case began long before the Soulmate reached American waters. Has also issued a formal public appeal through the U.S. Embassy in Nassau, seeking information about a second sailboat moored near the Soulmate in Aunt Pat's Bay on the night of April 4th. A Coast Guard memo states, "The owners and occupants of that vessel may have information relevant to the investigation. They are potential witnesses. As of this recording, their identity has not been confirmed publicly." According to NewsNation, Brian Hooker was on the Soulmate for approximately 4 days between April 4th and his arrest on April 8th. 4 days of access to the vessel and every system on board before Bahamian authorities took him into custody. What he did or did not do during those 4 days is now part of what CGIS is positioned to determine. The 8-foot dinghy remains in Bahamian custody, examined separately. The results of that examination have not been made public. CGS has the boat. They have the logs. They have the camera. They have the Starlink records. And the electronic evidence on that vessel does not answer to the passage of time. It simply recorded what happened. Part 8, where the case stands as of May 2026. This is where the investigation sits. Brian Hooker has not been charged with any crime. He denies all wrongdoing and is presumed innocent. The Royal Bahamas Police Force considers him a named suspect. Commissioner Shanta Knowles confirmed that publicly. Bahamian prosecutors recommended against filing charges at that stage. The investigation continues. The United States Coast Guard Investigative Service is conducting a separate active federal criminal investigation, a Coast Guard official confirmed to Newsweek. The Coast Guard Investigative Service is conducting a criminal investigation into the disappearance of CGIS has the Soulmate at Fort Pierce. The forensic examination is ongoing. The dinghy remains in Bahamian custody. The second sailboat's owner has not been publicly identified. When CBS News reached Brian's Michigan attorney Crystal Marie Hauser for comment after the boat was seized, she hung up the phone. Lynette Hooker has not been found. The Royal Bahamas Defense Force has not issued a public update on the search since April 16th. If you have any information about this case, particularly about the second sailboat moored near the Soulmate in Aunt Pat's Bay on the night of April 4th, 2026, submit a tip through the Coast Guard Tips app. The link is in the description below. The tip line is active, open, and anonymous. Before this became a federal investigation, before the seized boat and the silent AIS signal and the evidence bags on a dock in Florida, Lynette Hooker was a 55-year-old woman from Onstead, Michigan, who had grown up on the water. She was a mother. She was Darlene Hamlet's daughter. She was Carly Aylesworth's mom. She worked out. She was creative. She documented everything with a 360-degree camera. She grew up near lakes. She spent most of her life near boats. She knew how to swim. She walked away from AT&T. She sold her home. She used her retirement savings to live on open water because that was the life she chose. Her Instagram said it in her own words. Photographer. Sailor.
Day.
Living my
It's
best
the first
life.
Mother's
the last
Day
clip
without
she
my
posted
mom.
showed her dancing on the deck of the Soulmate. She captioned it,
It's
"Me
pretty
and my
hard
husband."
right now
Carly
to
Aylesworth has not
know that
stopped working to
she's
keep her
not a
mother's
text
name
away
in front of the
anymore.
public since April 5th. She hired an attorney. She gave interviews. She stayed in contact with investigators and with the Coast Guard. on Mother's Day 2026, her first without her mother. She posted a video and said it was hard to know her mom was not a text away anymore. She said it plainly, without drama. And that plainness said everything. Darlene Hamlet was in a car driving home from a passport office in Miami when she told reporters she was still counting on a miracle. That was 5 weeks before this recording. The miracle has not come. But the investigation is active. Federal agents are working through the Soulmate. The tip line is open, and Lynette Hooker is still missing. Closing the Soulmate is at a federal dock in Fort Pierce, Florida. Agents are working through it system by system, surface by surface, evidence bag by evidence bag. 2 investigations are active, one Bahamian, one federal American, and somewhere in the water around Aunt Pat's Bay near Elbow Cay in the Abaco Islands, Lynette Hooker has still not been found. This case is developing. When new verified information is confirmed, this channel will cover it. Subscribe right now if you want to be here when it does. This channel covers missing persons cases and federal investigations with sourced verified reporting. No guesswork, no speculation. Every comment is read. Every update is followed. Drop a comment and tell us what you think. What is the single question you believe needs to be answered first? The 8-hour gap. The identity of the second sailboat. What the Soulmate's logs reveal about where that boat was and what was happening on board during those missing hours. Tell us. And share this documentary with someone who should know about this case, because Lynette Hooker deserves answers. Her daughter is still working to find them. Her mother is still waiting. And in a federal facility in Fort Pierce, Florida, the boat named Soulmate is sitting still, holding whatever it knows.